Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the stream. It's been a hot minute. I think a few things have changed around here. The library is still the same. My love for today's author is still the same. We're, of course, still reading a new book every single month, which is a new mood read. But since I've last seen you all, I went to Germany, I got married, and I changed my username. So if you're just finding me now, I was formerly the Paperback Bruncher, which I put down below, and I am now Hannah Lisa Lore, which is my new name, because I figured we're at this point now where my life is so much more than books, although books is the largest part of my personality. So instead of being known by a moniker, I would like to be known for my name. So if this is my first time meeting you, hello and welcome. The book club is free and we read a new book every single month. So that's why we're catching up a little bit here due to my travels. I was quite literally abroad as we read the Guncle Abroad. So we will be welcoming a very wonderful author who is very near and dear to my heart to the stream today. So buckle up. This guest is someone who knows exactly how to pull at the heartstrings, make you laugh out loud, leave you thinking long after you've turned that last page. We're so thrilled to welcome the incredible Steven Rowley to the stream. Big round of virtual applause in the chat.
Hannah, hi.
Hello. Oh,
And congratulations.
I want to hug you right now. I'm like,
so much has happened since I saw you. We were lucky enough to get to meet this year at the Tucson Festival of Books.
Yes. And I, of course, mentioned a lot of the wonderful things that I had going on, but Steven just wrapped up an entire book tour for this book, went all over the country.
Alas, not abroad, but
maybe one day.
Maybe next one
day. Keep hyping up the book so that Steven can go abroad on the next one, please. That being said, I will give everybody a little bit of housekeeping real quick. Down below, we have all of the links that they should need, how to follow you, find all of your books, and support you. All of those things are very, very important. That's what we're here for. So please check out those links and follow Steven, tagging him when you're reading his books. And if you're loving the books, of course, write a wonderful review and tag him in only wonderful reviews. We don't tag authors in any bad reviews, but all reviews are valid. But I don't know anyone who's read this that would give it a bad review. That being said, I like to give a bit of a bio for each author that I join. It's always a little awkward to hear about yourself, but I also think it's important because you've accomplished so much. So someone should shout about your achievements, and it might as well be me. All right, so here we go. Buckle up. So Steven is the New York Times bestselling author of not one, not two, but 5 incredible authors. We'll get books. Sorry, we'll get to those ones as well in a second. You might have fallen in love with one of his previous works, Lily and the Octopus, a Washington Post notable book, or Swept Away by the Editor, one of my favorites, which was named one of NPR's best books of 2019. Then, of course, there's The Guncle, which we read way back in the day when we were still called Brunch Babes Reads. This was right when we were transitioning from pandemic being in person to being virtual. So we were going through a lot, you were going through a lot, and that book healed a lot for us. So it has a very special place in our heart. He came to our virtual stream back then. And of course, now we have the wonderful sequel, The Guncle Abroad. But in between there, you also wrote The Celebrants. So you've been very, very busy. And one exciting thing about The Celebrants is it was a Today Show read with Jenna's book club. So Jenna is fantastic. She picks really wonderful books. I do keep up with her book club pretty religiously. And you also, I believe, had a Audible original, which I was doing my research earlier this week, which snuck in there, and I didn't even realize this. So that's next on my list. It's the only thing I haven't read, listened to here. So, and that was voiced by Neil Patrick Harris. So everything you do is very epic and very wonderful and very grand. I feel like everything you do, you pour your full heart and soul into, which is just so beautiful to see. And we really feel it as your readers. And I know some, if not most, of your works are being adapted to screen. So maybe we can talk about that a little bit today. And last but not least, before we dive into questions and games, if you have questions for Steven, I have some from our book club already. Pop them in the chat and say hi in the chat, and we will share those at some point.
We love questions. We'd much rather talk about what people want to hear. But also, my goodness, are we out of time? Like, that was an incredible introduction.
Stop doing so much.
I know. Well, savor that Audible original, because otherwise I got to get back to work here.
Okay, I'll give it like a couple months or something.
Okay,
maybe. That being said, I also dressed for the occasion. So we talk about Guncle love languages, and we've got Guncle rules. So I had to, be on brand here. So sweating.
That's brilliant.
Because it's hot. All right. So diving in, like I've mentioned here, your books have a lot of like humor and heart, which are paired really well together. This is something I'm sure you talk about very often, but there has to be a very unique balance when there's so much heavy themes within a book. I'm very curious, what inspired you to create the character of Patrick O'Hara specifically? Is this something that's kind of who you wished you were, or someone you've met once, or the best parts of yourself or the worst parts of yourself? How did you choose this particular character, his particular quirks, and how he uniquely approaches grief and maybe some family dynamics that might not be so typical?
Yeah, well, to maybe backtrack for 1 second, you're right about that sort of intersection of I guess heart and humor, but I write a lot about grief, but I try to do that with a light touch, without sort of short shrifting the real emotion that's there. But humor has always, for me, been a part of my way through difficult times, whatever they may be. So I don't know why I choose to, hopefully that people laugh out loud with these books, but as many times as we say LOL in our everyday parlance, how many times are we actually laughing out loud and not just going LOL? And same with if there's an emotional reaction to this book. I've gotten a lot of readers. There's one moment in particular that say, "Oh, I was bawling during this moment," but to like evoke a visceral reaction from someone, just from the page, to move them to tears, that's also incredibly difficult. And I don't know why I chose to try to attempt both with all my books. So there must be something, seriously wrong with me. But Patrick himself, I guess you're right. I think it's like a heightened version of me, perhaps. We have a lot of things in common, certainly the way we look at the world, his politics, his empathy, his sense of humor, his pop cultural references. I'd say they all skirt very close to mine. He's a little bit younger than I am. He's better looking than I am, I imagine. He's got more money than I do because he's a television actor. Television pays better than publishing. But I always just sort of imagine he's also sadder than I am. Fortunately, he's been through some things that fortunately I haven't had to endure. But the way he looks at the world and survives, I think, is very similar to me, and it sort of helped have a character that's a little bit close to yourself, and which you can use to say things that you want to say about the world.
Mm-hmm. I would say too, from my personal experience of getting to know you a little bit, that Patrick is also much more reluctant when it comes to love than you are.
Yeah.
I feel like that's something that, like, I see you, at least from my version of you, that I see you fully dive into. And I mean, of course, I've gotten to connect with the lovely husband of yours here, Byron.
I was going to say, you've got 2 books by my husband behind you as well.
Mm-hmm.
So
one of our other book club alums. But with the both of you, I feel like, you're not afraid to be loud with your love and to embrace it and to show the world what this like beautiful marriage and relationship looks like. And you're also very raw and real about it, because it's not perfect either. But I think that, you're willing to really share what that looks like. So that's a beautiful thing.
Yay. Well, I know other writers who, I have writer friends who would assume being married to another writer, it would be a nightmare. But it absolutely works for us. But as you say, it's not all rosy. We had to learn how to, make it work, really. So that, there's certain things that, we're each other's first reader. Well, what does that mean? If I'm giving him something to read, am I asking him to read it as a spouse or as a fellow writer, and, with an editorial eye? What am I really looking for? And he's had to learn how to sort of, intuit what it is that I what it is that I need, but we make it work.
Mhm. That kind of gets my gears turning. So when he first read the Guncle, and maybe some other people in your lives when they first read the Guncle, which of course at the time I believe was just supposed to be a standalone. When did this like sequel news start kind of getting, planted in your ear? Was this like a publisher request? Was like, there's so much demand, do it again? Or was it your heart where later you were like, I'm not done? Or was Byron like, excuse you, honey, that worked really well for us. Can you try this again?
It would be helpful to our mortgage if you.
Yes. I mean, honestly, some things like that might not be the sexiest reason it started, if that is it, but things can start in a variety of ways, and that's the beauty of it. So I'm curious kind of where that sequel talk started, because I know in the interview you do before,
the mortgage answer was definitely not. Yeah. Well, again, like, let's just take a step back for a second. Yeah. For anyone who's not familiar, The Guncle is about a book about a sort of a semi-retired television actor, Patrick O'Hara, who's living a somewhat reclusive life in the California desert in Palm Springs when he's tasked with taking in his niece and nephew for the summer after the death of their mom. And it's not a spoiler to say, at the end of that book, those children go home to Connecticut, into a home where their mother is no longer there. And so Patrick has very strong feelings about sequels, and I guess so do I. I sort of lay them all out in very early in The Guncle Abroad. Also, one thing I never could have expected is the way that first book was embraced by readers and the Bookstagram community, and it really is something that I had no control over as the author. And I'm just completely bowled over by the way people embrace that book as something really special. And so, no, I had never intended to write a sequel. I thought it was complete. But in talking to readers about the book, I think a lot of people assume that I missed writing Patrick, and in fact, he is a fun character to write. But as I mentioned, there's a lot of Patrick, right here. Spoiler alert. So I can hang out with Patrick anytime I want to. It was really thoughts of the kids, that I kept going back to. At the end of that book, they go home. In many ways, their grief journey was just beginning as that first book ended. And so my thoughts kept turning back to them. Are the kids okay? And that's really where the idea for the sequel or the motivation to write a sequel came from. I wanted to know, what's going on with these kids. But I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified, because the one thing you don't want to do is interfere with anybody's goodwill for that first book, or undo anything that they find special about it. So it took me a while to work up the courage to even attempt it. And there's all sorts of special things with that first book, from becoming a bestseller to Whoopi Goldberg holding it up on The View and saying it was one of the books that makes her laugh, and she returns to it again and again when she needs to laugh. Or winning the Thurber Prize for American humor. That's the highest award we have for written humor in the US. So, I'm just sort of stunned. And so I was worried that, oh my God, I could never live up to the original. And there were days where I was like, oh my God, will it be funny? Can I make it that funny again? And then there were days I was worried, like, oh, is it too funny? Which is not just me patting myself on the back, but saying, am I chasing jokes at the expense of the other parts of the formula that made that book so special, which was, truly the heart and an examination of grief. And then every novel, sequel or not, should start with a question. It should have something to say. And so if I hadn't been able to find, to ask the right question or to find the right entry point into another adventure, I like to think I wouldn't have attempted it.
It's a tall order to follow, for sure. And I'm sure it kind of feels like, can I make lightning strike twice?
Yeah, it's scary. It's scary.
I'm like, my palms started sweating just like thinking about that. I'm like, oh, that's a lot of pressure. And you didn't even touch on the fact that you also narrated the first book. So not only did you have to, of course, write this beautiful story and try to, serve justice with the sequel, but now you've cornered yourself into a little hole here where you narrated the first one. You are the voice of Patrick. You're going to have to do it again.
I was going to have to do it again. Oh my goodness. I don't know. It's not common, I imagine, for writers of fiction, authors of fiction to narrate their own audiobooks, which I've done several times now. But yeah, there were certain things we were gonna do though. I mean, we talked maybe previously about when I narrated the first one. When I was writing the first book, I thought I was so clever. I was like, I'm going to give one of the kids a lisp, and that way I don't have to tag every piece of dialogue. I don't have to write he said, she said, Maisie said, or Grant said. It'll be clear which child is talking. And then it came time to narrate the audiobook, and I was like, son of a bit, like who did this? So page 1 of the Guncle Abroad, Grant outgrows his lisp. I know, so sad. The kids are growing up too fast. But then what I didn't realize that all the new characters are Italian. So, because it takes place overseas. So I don't, it was just as much of a nightmare to narrate this one. I should be Ann Patchett now. I should get Meryl Streep or Tom Hanks to do my next audiobooks. But for now,
you've got some
listeners are stuck with me.
Now. Yeah, I think so. I mean, you could always be included as like part of the cast. I know a lot of us love those, like multiple narrators. Oh, yeah. That's an idea.
That's a good idea. I'll take a back seat though to someone with a little bit more than a high school theater background.
You know how in movies, once they're adapted, if it's a book to screen movie, often the author makes like a little cameo.
Yep.
I think the author should make the cameo in their audiobooks. Maybe like they're like the barista or someone. It's just like a quick one sentence. And you're like, hey, was that?
I'm just gonna be latte for Patrick.
Yes, that would be fantastic. Yeah. That'd be so cool. I know you touched on it a little bit about Maisie and Grant growing up and how they were your motivation. What was really important for you to convey in the sequel here, The Guncle Abroad, about their characters in particular? Did you know that, you kind of wanted to have them at a certain point in maybe their grief journey, or, how did you approach writing their story for the second book here?
Yeah, well, we start with a time jump, right? The new book takes place 5 years after the events of the first one. So instead of 6 and 9, the kids are now, how quick can I do math? 11 and 14. I don't know if that decision came so much from thinking about the kids originally, but I just knew that, talk about capturing lightning again. I knew it wouldn't be the same if I kind of just picked up exactly where the first book ended. That would be so difficult to really do kind of more of the same. I needed to give myself some breathing room. And that allowed the kids to sort of really grow. And in the first book, I think, maybe I was a little guilty of thinking of the kids as a kind of a monolithic entity. They were the kids. They had the same sort of needs and wants and desires. And this one, I really had to think about them as individuals, as Maisie and Grant this time, and think of all the ways they've grown, not just because they're 5 years older, but because they've had Patrick's influence in their life for 5 years. He's given them the sort of the language, this little sort of screwball comedy kind of rat-a-tat-tat, to push back on some of his crazier antics, which they're no longer charmed by. But also how his grief informed how each of them has grown and what they want from life. And I think, for Grant, it sort of kept him on the younger side of 11. It sort of stunted his growth a little bit, not having his mom. But for Maisie, I think she's matured a little too quickly, maybe. And she takes on some of that maternal role for her younger brother, who's missing his mom. So there was a lot to consider in their characterizations these times. And they are very much individuals. They have different needs. They have different wants and desires this go around. So taking them from sort of one entity into two very specific characters, I think was the biggest part and biggest challenge of this new sequel.
And it works so well with how the stories are laid out because I feel like in book one, like how you mentioned, like they were a monolith. I mean, to Patrick, they kind of were. He didn't really know them. You
Yeah.
know, he was like, "You know me. You came to my house once. I have a uncle." Like that is not knowing your uncle. You know that you don't know that person.
Yeah.
You know, knowing someone is so much deeper than that. You know their quirks, and you know you've got little inside jokes, or you have all these stories and memories together. And so at the time, he didn't have that. He had to build that up and get there. So it makes sense that now in book two, like he knows them
Yeah.
separately and he understands their needs. So it's kind of poetic in that sense that, you know, in book two, we get to know them more in that way too.
Right. And it's fun. It's fun because, you know, relationships are really at the heart of, you know, all of my books. I don't write the most sort of plot forward books. There's no sort of mystery or sort of figuring out, or if, you know, if there are mysteries, they're emotional. It's relationships are always front and center. So that Patrick has a relationship with each of these kids now, and some real history there now. It was a lot of fun to tap into.
I mean, there is a bit of a mystery in this one. I will say who is at the door is a bit of a mystery.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
That's true. I think I don't know where I was going with that. I just get excited. Anyways, one thing I like to do with my author interviews here is I know a lot of times, you know, you get to speak with a lot of different members of whether it be press or book clubs. So you answer a lot of the same questions probably over and over. And as much as you love talking about those characters, I try to kind of refresh it for everyone by including some games because I feel
now you're going to keep me on my toes. Now let's see, how many cups of coffee have I had this morning?
I think that at least for myself and plenty of the book club and, you know, reader friends I've talked to, that there is obviously a plethora of books in the world. Our TBRs are never ending. It's a meme. It's a joke to all of us. So how do we choose what to read when there's so much out there? Is very, very difficult, honestly, and can be quite overwhelming. So getting to meet an author, whether it be online or through their social media, a sense of their personality is almost key at this point of like getting to know the author in a bit of the sense because, you know, some authors are problematic or support things that you wouldn't want to support. So it has to be an intentional choice at this point of supporting particular authors. So that's why I also like these kinds of games. Not like it's a test. This sounded really intense, but in the sense
I know this is like a pass fail now. Am I going to be canceled?
No,
Yeah.
but I think that, you know, of course your work is something you get to talk about often, but this gives you a sense of who, you know, the author is as a human, which I think is important. All right. So we are starting with some Guncle advice today. So how it works is I'll give you a couple different scenarios and you have to respond with either a piece of advice or it could be a Guncle rule or a Guncle love language, whatever comes to you in your heart that either you or Patrick or maybe you're one and the same in this situation would come up with. So
all right, let's see what I can do. In real life, I'm the Guncle to 5. The oldest of whom is now 15 or 15 going on 16 for the Sound of Music fans out there. But we'll see. We'll see if this is sage advice, if I should be giving it or not.
I was like, so me. I literally posted a dress and stories the other day, and I was like, is this giving Liesel? Like, I think it is, right? Okay, musical girl. All right, situation number 1. Your niece insists on wearing her Halloween costume to school every day for a week. What would you say?
Oh my goodness. Well,
It's too much.
I would hope that if it was, I would hope that it was clever, the costume, and I would hope that it reflected her personality. I think that Halloween costumes for women sometimes are too reductive and needlessly sexy. So if it were age appropriate, I would encourage her to just be whoever she wants to be in that moment. And if that is the person reflected by that costume, then go for it, and who cares what anybody else says.
I love that. I keep seeing on my TikTok like little kids in hot dog costumes, and that's what came into my mind. I'm like, a hot dog, yes.
Yeah, I was thinking of Maisie in that at 14. You know, it's a sort of a little trickier age for costumes. But yeah, young kids, especially. You know, I always think like it's. I was so moved by this video of Kamala Harris greeting a young girl, you know, maybe 3-4 years old, wearing a cape. Yeah. And I love the idea of kids feeling powerful, and if wearing a cape, helps them feel powerful in any moment, I'm all about it.
And I think, I don't know, not that we're asking for my Guncle advice, but building on it here, I think there is like a beauty of self-expression and kind of character building here, of figuring out like who you are. And sometimes you have to kind of do these experimental things in the real world to discover those pieces of yourself. So maybe you are like many of alternate characters you've read in books that wear a tiara to high school, or maybe you are wearing a Spider-Man with built-in muscles for a straight week to elementary school. I don't know, but
I love what I love about sort of superheroes for young kids in a way is that heroes at their best should be, helpers, and there should be a kindness that's there. And so teaching those sort of attributes to kids, I think it's all upside.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So now your nephew has told you he wants to drop out of school to pursue a career as a professional video game streamer. What's your response?
My response is Ready Player One, but finish school first. Don't be in a rush to do, like you can do whatever you want to do and you can be whatever you want to be. But I will say for myself, this is Steven talking, not Patrick. For myself, I can do what I do today for two reasons. And that is, one, I had access to a well-funded public school education and a public library card, and parents who encouraged me to use it. And those two things got me everywhere in life. So you'd have to finish school first. But then if you want to be a video game streamer, go for it.
You'll be the first subscriber on Twitch.
Exactly. If I could just figure out what or where that is.
I got you. I'll help you out. All right. Two more scenarios.
Okay.
Your nephew is nervous about giving a presentation in class because he's afraid of public speaking. I think you've got some skill sets here. What would be your advice?
Oh my God. Do we go with the traditional? Okay, I'm going to go with traditional advice, but I'm going to put an abroad flair on it because we're from the Guncle Abroad. The sort of picture the audience in their underwear is so disarming. But because some of the book took place in Paris, I always thought it was funny that a bakery there is Boulangerie, which my French teacher taught me. Just think of scary underwear. So I would say, just picture the audience in scary underwear.
Love that.
And maybe have good carbs beforehand.
Oh, that's funny. I like that a lot. I think too, there's just like this element of it's okay to be scared and do it anyways too, which I think is beautiful. I was telling Steve that I've done tons of interviews in person, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and I still get nervous every time. But it's about, pushing through and enjoying it too.
I brought two of my nieces to the Today Show last year when the Celebrants was on the Today Show book club pick with Jenna, and I was going on the show to do my interview, and I brought them backstage into to my dressing room and into the green room, and my niece asked me if I was nervous because I don't think they could have imagined going on television. And I stopped and I thought for a moment, and I don't know if this was helpful or not, but I said, you know what? No, I'm not. And here's why. Because I deserve to be here. And what I explained to her was that I had put in the hard work of writing 4 books and building an audience and making this book so that it was chosen by one of these sort of national book clubs, that I didn't feel nervous because I no longer felt like an imposter. And I think there is something in that, in that moment where I have suffered from imposter syndrome in the past. Like, why does anybody want to hear from me? Why, I just, clear your head of the self-depreciating questions and just stand with authority and know that you deserve to be up there.
Yeah, you absolutely do. And I don't know, like as a friend, I'm like, that just like makes my heart so happy for you that like you recognize that, because it's exactly what I hoped you would feel in that moment, because you deserve it all. I was like, I'm going to get emotional. I always get emotional. Oh, goodness. I think too, for Patrick in particular, with that question would be maybe a don't do what I do, because there's a particular speech he makes in this book, without giving any spoilers, that I would say is not maybe the best recommendation of how to give a speech. So
Wait, I'm trying to think. What scene was it?
there was a certain fighting of who would go first for this particular speech.
Oh, yes. Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. Yeah.
Do
I
as I
know
say, not
exactly
as I
what
do.
you're talking about.
There we go.
Yeah.
All right, last piece of Guncle advice. Your niece is planning her first school dance and asks if she should go with a date or with friends. What would be the advice?
Oh, again, this falls in the same category. No need to hurry to grow up. Go with your friends. There will always be time for romance. Go with your friends. And I think because these books are very much inspired by the anti-Mame novels from the 1950s, which was then a Broadway show with Rosalind Russell, and then a movie with Rosalind Russell, and then a Broadway musical, Mame, with Angela Lansbury and B. Arthur. And they had a song in that called Bosom Buddies. And there's a lyric in that song that is something like, if life should reject you, I'll be there to protect you. And I think of that moment, like friends, there's nothing greater than having friends who've got your back. So I would go to the dance with friends. And if you want to ask a boy to dance, or a girl to dance, or anyone to dance, and you should be rejected, you'll have your friends there to protect you. So I think it's winning to go with friends.
I think that's a perfect approach. I don't feel like you'd ever regret going with your friends. All right, diving into a couple more questions here. So, of course, we keep talking about the family dynamics in the books here and how they're very complex. Is there kind of a takeaway that you would hope that readers would have after reading, either book, both of the books, when it comes to how you approach dynamics with your own family? Maybe it's chosen family, maybe it's biological family, but what do you kind of hope they feel in the sense of family when they're reading your books? And these two books in particular, I should say.
Yeah, I think that sense that family shows up. But you're sort of right to mention the idea of chosen family. These books are very much about extended family, like real family. But Patrick and the children's mother, Sarah, their friendship, was very much, they were very much family. But that was a chosen family too. Chosen family is such a theme in queer literature, And I think back to the time when I was first coming out, and the queer literature that was available to me, I'm aging myself now, but we're going back 30, 35 years ago, were stories that often seemed very lonely, about lonely lives lived in the shadows, right? But on the flip side, I also read Armistead Maupin, Tales of the City, books that then showed me the importance of found family, because I think we forget how quickly things have changed, particularly for queer people. Like, so many had to leave their own families or rejected by their own families and had to move to cities or other places where they could find family of their own. But yeah, the idea that family, whether by blood or found, will show up is something I hope that people can take away from these. And also, they're sort of strangely sibling stories, and not just because of Maisie and Grant, but because of Patrick and his brother Greg and his sister Clara. All have such interesting relationships. And I love, the first book, I have two sisters who real life always made me tell everyone, we're not Clara. Clara's not based on us. But in this book, Clara's having a kind of a great time. 5 years have done her really well too. But I love those sort of sibling relationships too. I love books about siblings, Hello Beautiful, and Napolitano's book last year, or The Most Fun We Ever Had by Claire Lombardo. Like, some of these, because siblings are sometimes our first friends and our first enemies, and it's lifelong, complicated relationships, but they're so rich. And I always love books about siblings.
I like the rawness that you approach to writing family too, where you're not afraid to make it a little messy and a little complicated. I come from a very complicated family myself, and I have 6 siblings, so it's impossible to be best friends
Ah,
close to all of them. And I'm the youngest too, and I don't live by them. So I think I can relate a lot to kind of how Patrick almost has to choose to make that effort, even though, maybe he grew up with them and they were once close, but time has passed and life
yeah,
has changed a lot. And so maybe he had started to build his own chosen family, but he did have this biological family that he was no longer close with. So it's interesting to kind of see his journey back to them a bit, and about how sometimes, maybe they're not closest in all the ways, like it's never perfect, but they found new ways to get along, to appreciate each other. And, it's a very interesting, messy dynamic, which I appreciate
yeah.
very much.
That resonates with me so much. I'm the oldest of 4
Mhm.
siblings in real life, but I'm the one who left, right? I'm the one who moved across the country. They're all still very sort of geographically very close. And so, yeah, I find myself the one who sort of feels the most distant at times, and yet the one who's trying to keep the relationship going at times. And not that they're not all part of that, but I feel an extra uh, responsibility because I'm the one who chose to leave.
Mhm.
And it's weird how technology has changed with that. When I first left home in the early '90s, it's like you couldn't just shoot a text or or have even a cell phone on you to call. It was much harder to do. But now, at least with technology and social media, and we can share memes and all sorts of stuff that we couldn't have imagined doing when we were younger.
Well, and also similarly, both of us do not have children. And as you
Mhm.
mentioned, we both have nieces and nephews as well. So that also complicates the dynamic, because how do you keep in touch with children? Yes, we have all these resources now, but children need you to show up in different ways, which we also see in the book, and, parallels in real life. But it's very complicated of like, how do you show up as this, gup or whatever it is in their lives, and how do you make that impact and be there for them when you don't necessarily live nearby? So it's
Yeah,
hard. I don't have
it's
answers there.
it's very true. And now my nieces and nephews, the older ones have some sort of ability. They have phones with very sort of limited ability, but they are sort of allowed to text and
Mhm.
chat with different family members and stuff like that. So I'll get these messages of 15 emojis, and it's like, oh my god, it's like trying to decipher hieroglyphics. Trying to
Mhm.
talk with them. But I'm grateful we do. Or sometimes it's the communication is very fun. I'm thinking of
Mhm.
my niece when she was, I don't know, maybe 12 at this point, and her parents were moving. My sister was moving. They bought a new house or something. I was like, so what's going on? And she's like, well, we bought a house, as if she were on the mortgage too, at 12 or something. It just makes me laugh. But I love like how adult they are becoming, and yet also how generational communication is so
Mhm.
different.
Mhm. No, it's so nice to have these resources now, and to be able to, at least somewhat stay in touch. But it's complicated. And I think too, I am 30 right now, and I think, I mean, there's this point in your late 20s where your frontal lobe finally develops. And I feel like when I had moved out, I was much younger. So to me, I didn't really maybe prioritize these things or realize the importance of them in my, long term life, and about, the importance of family. So I think
Yeah,
now,
I mean, it definitely inspired these books, right? Like, I did not know how important these relationships with nieces and nephews would become in my life. I mean, it's one of the great sort of joys, and so I love sort of having these books to celebrate that
Mhm.
relationship. And by the way, there's an aunt character in the new book, in the sequel, this time. So we get that from several perspectives.
Mhm. We've talked a lot about the family, but I'd like to touch a little bit on the love story within
Mm.
both of these books. So Patrick is dealing again with being single in this book, at the age of, I believe he's almost 50 now.
Hmm.
How do you think, some of his views on love have changed? Maybe they're changing throughout the book, but what kind of lessons do you think that Patrick is going through when it comes to the Guncle Abroad?
Yeah, I think that's sort of his biggest his biggest sort of character journey is, in the Guncle, why he was so adept at teaching the children about grief was because he had lost, his partner, his great love, in a car accident before having taken in years before having taken in the kids after the loss of their mom. So he's someone who is sort of very hardened by grief, and I think his arc over that first book is sort of realizing that his grief journey, which resulted in him very much withdrawing from life and from those around him, was not the one he wanted modeled for the kids. And so that was really incumbent upon him then to sort of claw his way back to life and into integrating himself into the world as to demonstrate that there is a better way. In this book, yes, grief is still part of the story. I mean, that's, I think, one thing I really wanted to explore the difference in was sort of the idea of what's the difference between moving forward and which I think is a good thing, and moving on, which I don't think, I didn't want the children to turn the page entirely on the memory of their mother. But it's 5 years on, and Greg, the children's father, is engaged to be remarried, and the kids are not happy. And so this time, Sir Patrick, as much as teaching them about grief, is there to teach them about love, which really sort of forces him to look inward again and realize the mistakes he's made, perhaps. And is he going to find the courage to once again demonstrate a better way to put his money where his mouth is, in a certain sense?
I really love hearing authors talk about their books and picking apart these little pieces and connecting them with real life situations, because I feel like as we continue to talk, I continue to see even more parallels to real life and recognize even more lessons within the book. And as you were talking, you made me realize another really great message within this story, or both stories actually, is that it's essentially never too late. Whether that's to reconnect with the family, whether it's to find love again, whether it's to go to therapy and learn some things about yourself. I think Patrick is always learning, and maybe he's not the most willing to learn at first. He's a little reluctant, we'll give him that. But at the end of the day, he is always growing. And I think that is one of the biggest, things about his character that makes him so lovable, is he is always willing to try. And I don't know. I just really love that.
Yeah, I think, it's interesting. Sort of in both of these books, they sort of take place in a very limited amount of time. In that first book, he had the kids for the
they're
summer.
Not incredibly long. You pack a lot in there.
You pack a lot in there. And this one, it is a trip through Europe, right? It's another summer he's got with the kids. And so in doing that, you can't have a character arc that, wildly goes from, because, how much do people change over the course of 3 months, right? It wouldn't be realistic to have him be a totally different person at the end of the summer than he was. So sometimes you're just nudging a character from a shorter A to B. And that can be just as rewarding, and it can feel just as profound. But I think Patrick's a character that's always almost there. Almost. He just needs that push. And that is something you can do over the course of a story that takes place in a condensed period of time. But it's interesting to see how much the kids are also the teacher. He's ostensibly teaching them in both books, but boy, do they really teach him something in return. They have great lessons for their uncle, particularly in this book, one which stems from a very well. Listen, I've got now an award for humor writing. People recognize these books as funny, hopefully, but and I think I have all these clever jokes in there. But man, I think the biggest laugh that I hear from readers comes from an 11-year-old using a well-timed, use of the word, a strong curse word. So it's I can construct all this wordplay and all that, but having an 11-year-old use the F word is the greatest comedic moment in the book.
You recognize it's funny no matter what. It's always a good one. So every joke doesn't need to be complex. All right, a couple more questions in a quick little game, and then we'll get to some audience Q&A.
Yeah.
So don't forget, if you've got any questions, you can leave those in the chat. And I've got some for the book from the book club members who couldn't be here in person today that will be watching the replay, so we'll shout them out as well. I know one question that I had, and many of us had, was if you have, I think we even asked you this before, but there's some new members joining
Okay.
too. Do you have any dream cast for who would play any of the characters in the book? Maybe you visualized them while writing the story, or maybe one of your readers, said, I picture this person. You're like, that would be perfect. So curious if you have any cast members.
Yeah, I mean, this goes. There is a movie in development for the first Guncle book. We had a writer's strike and an actor strike last year in Hollywood that slowed that down, but things are hopefully picking up steam again. And so, this is always something that's sort of at the very forefront of my mind. I will say, I don't really picture people while I'm writing, but I hear from a lot of readers. There are definitely some fan favorites. Including Dan Levy from Schitt's Creek, Neil Patrick Harris, and Michael Urie, both of whom have done audiobooks for me in the past. There's Sean Hayes, there's Jesse Tyler Ferguson, there's Matt Bomer. I hear a lot. So there's some great names to be tossed around for Patrick. And what I find so interesting is a lot of these people either have background in as being television actors, which Patrick does, but also some of the, Matt Bomer and Neil Patrick Harris and others, Jesse Tyler Ferguson, all have kids now, which is sort of interesting to see how that shapes their performance.
Mm-hmm. I think that could bring a lot to the character because, I think it's easier to fake being awkward and learning about children than to fake, the love and care of children that would come later in the story.
Yeah.
I'm not an actor, but just thinking objectively, I like those casts. It's interesting. We'll be very excited to see all of the announcements as they come. And I'm really praying that you have a cameo in there somewhere so I can scream when you come on.
You try keeping me off that set. We'll see. But yeah, hopefully I'll have some news to announce soon.
Hopefully you pull a better cameo than Miss Colleen Hooper in this latest movie where she's in the background and trying not to look. Hopefully you're a little more subtle. I think you can handle it. But even if you don't, we'll love it anyways. All right. Speaking of the abroad part of this book, I wanted to kind of come up with some goofy travel abroad questions. So
all right.
It's a very lighthearted quiz about European landmarks, some cultural practices, or just travel things in general. You have to give us your best answers or guesses if you do not know the answer.
I'm guaranteed they're going to be guesses, but okay.
I think you might know a few. In France, it's traditional to greet someone with how many kisses on the cheek?
Oh my goodness. It's either 2 or maybe 3. You do 1 on each cheek, but then do you go back to the first cheek? I don't know. I'm going to say 2, but maybe it's 3.
You're right with the 2, 1 on each cheek.
Okay.
Starting strong.
Yeah.
It can vary by region though. So apparently maybe someone does 3. Maybe they're both right. But in general, it's the 2.
In the Champagne region of France, they're all drunk on bubbly. So it could go 5, 6, 7. Who knows?
Just depends how many glasses of champagne.
Yeah.
True or false? In Italy, it's considered bad luck to walk under a ladder.
Oh, goodness. I would say Italy is a superstitious country. True?
Yeah, in many places as well. But like I said, these are just some goofy questions.
Yeah, I'm good with
Tried to go abroad to a variety of places as well. What famous landmark in London has a nickname that means the clock tower?
Oh my goodness. Is it just Big Ben?
Mm-hmm. And what part this is like a follow-up question to that question. What part is actually named Big Ben? Do you know?
Oh my goodness. Is it the tower or is it just the clock face? I don't know. Let's go with the clock face. I don't know.
It's the bell.
The bell?
Everyone, just calls the whole thing Big Ben, but
but it's the bell. All right.
If you're in Spain and someone says vamos a tapier, what are they inviting you to do?
Vamos? Would that be go or come with or let's go? let's go have tapas. Is it tapas?
Yes, I tried to pick one easier. I was like, we're gonna build up your confidence.
I'll tell you. I live in Palm Springs, California now, but I grew up in Maine, where everyone took French because to speak with the Quebecois who would flood over the Canadian border into Maine every summer, and so it seemed prudent to speak French. But so I don't speak a lick of Spanish, even though now I live in a very sort of Spanish-speaking area. Whew. God, I was able to sound
I spent time in Mexico, but I didn't know the word for tapas because it's not really a thing for us here. So we're both learning things. The next one I should have known probably 2 months ago before I went to Germany. But in Germany, would you say that this is a true or false? It's rude to clink beer glasses without making eye contact.
I think that's rude anywhere. Is that true? I would say true.
It's
yeah.
true.
Okay. Good. Yeah. And I always know that. And I know like not to toast with water is bad luck. I don't know.
That's what I hear.
It's true.
I don't know if this is just my mother-in-law thing, but like you also need to clink every single person, even if it's like a group. There's no group clink. You gotta get everyone.
You gotta get everyone individually, and eye contact is important.
Mm-hmm. I'm learning.
Sorry if I look creepy before we have our beer, but it's because I'm making eye contact.
It's important.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. We've got one for Italy. So I am going to butcher this. I don't know any Italian, so I will try my best here. But we are not allowed to use the Maisie translation app for this. We're doing our best. What common phrase might you hear in Italy if you're told to fare la bella figura?
But it would be beautiful figura. Would that be? You have a nice body? What are you saying?
That's really literal. It's more like of a figurative saying. So we're telling someone to make a good impression or present yourself well.
Oh. And so what would be the response to make a good impression?
It's just the translation.
Okay, good. Phew. All right. Yeah.
That was it.
Make a good impression. Put your best self forward. Okay.
Yes. All right. We've got two more. True or false? In Japan, it's polite to slurp your noodles loudly to show appreciation for the meal.
Oh, goodness. I feel like that would be more an Italian thing. In Japan, I would say, no, that would be impolite. Although I would take it as the highest compliment if I were the chef.
It's actually true. It says you're enjoying the food. They like it. So.
Oh, good. Good for the Japanese. And boy, now I want just a big bowl of udon or Japanese noodles. Yeah.
All right. Last abroad question. Another true or false. In France, you should never cut the tip off of a baguette when sharing it at the table.
But who likes just the tip? Who likes the tip? Yeah. No, cut the tip off. Who wants the tip?
This was a very weird, language question. Okay. So it's technically you're supposed to break it with your hands. They just don't want. It's rude to cut it like that.
To cut it off. Okay, got it. Break bread. We're gonna break bread. We're gonna go to the boulangerie and get a baguette and break bread.
Maybe we need to download Maisie's app.
Yeah,
we started strong, but we kind of fell apart at the end.
We may need to. Yeah.
All right. So I have a couple questions from our book club members here.
All right. Lay them on me.
All right. So she is wondering particularly about the character of Sarah. I know you talked about Clara, but is it based on anyone in real life? This question comes from Mimi.
Yeah, it didn't start out that way. But, when I was writing the Guncle, I did lose one of my best friends from college to breast cancer. And she left behind a 6-year-old son. So that's where, I said that I was inspired by the Mame novels from the 1950s. And that was truly my sort of jumping off point for writing a sort of a modern day take on this. But Mame sent her nephew to boarding school and it sort of sidestepped the issue of grief. And so when I lost my friend, I was thinking very seriously about grief in children and what are the responsibility of, the people who are around her to remind this child how fiercely he was loved. And so I just couldn't help it. Like there were parts of her that made their way into the, as I wrote further drafts, there were sort of parts of her that informed the character of Sarah. And so, yeah, I would say I had a really lovely inspiration.
It's actually very touching for me too. It's not something I talk about a ton, but I had a sister who passed away when I was in second grade, and her name was Sarah, just with an H.
Oh, yeah.
So all the Sarahs I've ever met in the world are very wonderful, lovely people. I've never met a Sarah I didn't like, so it's very touching. And sorry for your loss as well.
I'm sorry for yours as well.
Another question from Mimi. Are there any possibilities of the Guncle road trip? She's demanding a third.
Oh, a third book?
To be quite the adventure.
Right. Oh my God. I'm just pulling this out. I'm out sitting at my desk here. I'm just pulling out this. My publisher made these sort of really cute maps with that have sort of the destinations from the book, but that's what sort of road trip reminded me of. But my favorite thing is not only this sort of Julie Andrews twirling here, but this kangaroo, because Grant mistakes Austria for Australia in the book. So but now a road trip, I think so is the question is will there be a third? I was also, this was stuck to these paint samples, which is can we just help me choose what to paint my front door?
You're one thing at a time. I haven't picked out my paint yet. I don't know.
Will there be a third? I don't know. As I said, I had no plans to write a second when I finished the first. So I currently have no plans, but you never know. It's sort of nagging thoughts about these kids. I wouldn't be surprised if I felt a responsibility to see these kids through to young adulthood, but we'll see. We need a little breathing room and maybe another time jump. But truly, if we are back here in the year 2034 or something, and I am on, book 8, and it's the Guncle goes to space or something, please, Hannah, it is your responsibility to rein me in. I just need a hook to just drag me off stage. Please.
If it's turning into Fast and Furious or situations, the Guncle goes more abroad.
Guncle harder, yeah.
This one is more of a comment that she wanted to share than a particular question. But she said, having followed you on Instagram for such a long time, she can't help but picture you as a bit of the character of Patrick, which we've discussed a little. And Patrick is so funny, and she knows that you must be as well, because, that humor does come from you. And now we've discussed that you literally have an award for it. So I feel like next time I see you in person, I need to do what this very prestigious family did to Patrick every time they saw him and shouted out his award. I'm going to just start shouting this out to you. But more of a comment than anything. And kind of building off that, in some of our book club discussions that we've had, we all have so much love for Patrick. And there obviously, you've mentioned so many of the personal connections that you have with Patrick, and you share a decent amount of your life. I wouldn't say you're an oversharer, but you definitely share a lot about your life where the readers do connect with you as the author as well. And so a lot of our love for Patrick is because of you, and we love you as well. So. Mushy as always. She always.
I know. Well, no, that's wonderful. Definitely tag me in that. Definitely tag me in a comment like that. That's for sure.
And what's it called? Maybe your answer is a bit like the wonderful Simone Biles here, who finished the Olympics and people asked her what's next. So maybe it's the paint swatches, but she just bought a Birkin and she was like, shut up, I'm getting a Birkin. Don't ask me what I'm doing after this. So maybe your answer is a Birkin. I don't know. But what do you want us to pay attention to coming from next from you? So maybe it's just watch your Instagram for adaptation news, or, what do you want to announce?
Well, I'm hard at work. I'm writing my first children's book, which I'm super excited about. And so stay tuned. I hope to have details I can share about that soon. I'm not sure how much I'm allowed to talk about, but I know. No pressure. But yeah, so that's something I'm very excited about. And then, I just started work on a new book. So this was the first year I had back-to-back books with the Celebrants and the Guncle Abroad. There are wonderful authors who somehow manage to do a book a year. That almost killed me. So I had to take a little breather, but I'll be back hopefully in 2026 with something new. So I just started working on that, and I'm very excited. But yeah, if I had some TV or movie news soon, I mean, like, my God, I've got Lily is in development. The Editor is a movie that I would love to see, and that's sort of snaking its way through the process as well. So I would love to see something make it to the screen. So fingers crossed. And what country is it bad luck to cross both fingers?
Not this one. You're good. I cannot wait to bawl my eyes out to seeing them adapted, because they already make me cry just reading it. But I have the worst imagination on the planet. So once I see something getting adapted to screen, my emotions are like tenfold. I'm like, this is exactly what it should be like.
Yes.
If you read it, or if you write it, we will read it. If it gets adapted, we will watch it. We are your biggest fans. So we're just always here to support you. And one really important thing of our particular book club in my conversations with authors is always paying it forward a little bit as well. We've spent an hour all about you. Now I would like to spend a brief second talking about some authors that you love, and something really special about today, August 17th. It's Romance Bookstore Day, so I felt like this was a little bit of a big ask to get you out of your comfort zone, perhaps a little. But if you have any authors you love that write romance really well, it doesn't necessarily have to be qualified as a romance novel. So like your books do have romance, but I wouldn't call them a romance novel. But any authors you would recommend that write romance very beautifully. And a follow-up question, since it's bookstore, any bookstores you'd recommend?
Oh, goodness. Well, so yeah, I don't read a lot of romance, but I have a lot of friends who write romance, and I'm always so impressed, because talk about sometimes romance writers are sometimes some of the most prolific writers we have. But I'm going to shout out some people writing romance in the queer space. Well, first of all, no, I'll finish that thought since I started. Okay. Amy Spalding, it's a really lovely human who writes in the sort of sapphic romances, female romances, which are really great. There's an author, Timothy Janofsky, who writes gay male sort of romance that his books are a lot of fun.
He does some holiday ones as well, too.
Yeah, a couple holiday ones, which are great. Yeah, and then I have a friend, Chip Pons, who self-published a book and has his first traditionally published book, romance, coming out in the spring. So I'll be on the lookout for that. But I have so many wonderful friends too who write, and romance writers are some of the most fun. When I go to book festivals, when I saw you in Tucson, I was like, I always find the romance writers, because they have the most fun. The romance writers are like, we're going to karaoke, come along, or we're going to hit the bars tonight, come out with us. Truly some lovely people. Abby Jimenez, who's huge right now, is such a lovely person. Catherine Center, who has the rom-commers out right now, such a lovely person. And so there's so many great people writing in the romance space.
I love that. Any bookstores? I know you've got one local to you.
Yeah, well, I always love to shout out my local indie. And for anybody who wants to have a signed copy of any one of my books, if you order it through The Best Bookstore in Palm Springs, which is, I guess, maybe ironically named, this is the only bookstore in Palm Springs, but it's called The Best Bookstore in Palm Springs. If you order through them, you can always order a signed copy, a signed and personalized copy through them, and they ship anywhere in the U.S. and maybe abroad. I'm not sure. I can't speak for them, but check with them.
Okay. I am going to shout out a couple romance authors that I'm really loving. One is one I've been reading for a while, who writes a variety, YA, adult, but also some fantasy. She's trying a lot of different things. She's written a lot of really incredible stories. That is Sajni Patel, who I actually just got to meet recently at Steamy LitCon after years of loving her. And she's also just a badass of a person. She is so cool. And so she writes characters so well. They feel like real people just leaping off the page. And, you start to daydream about what they're up to. It gets wild. She's just a wonderful writer. two other authors, Kyla Zhao and Taj McCoy. And coincidentally, all three of them, this is a plug, will be on my YouTube next in a week from today, same time. So it'll be an all romance stream next Saturday. They're all absolutely fantastic. I'll be deep diving into all of their books because at this point, I only have 2 books left, and then I've read the entire catalog.
Wow.
That was my goal. So I've been very, very busy. And as far as romance bookstores, I know everybody talks about the Ripped Bodice, which is wonderful. I also really, of course, love Stimulant. Like I said, I just went there. I need to make it to Florida to go see them in person. But a little bit closer to your side of the corner of the world here, Meet Cute Bookstore in San Diego is adorable. So I really, really like it there. And one more. I'm like, I could talk about bookstores all day.
Oh, no kidding.
Really loving Annabelle's. I don't know if
Annabelle's. Yep.
Okay. I was like, I think you would know because it's close
Yep.
to this.
And I forget, it's in Studio City or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And Annabelle herself, she was like looking around for bookstores and realized that there was a lack of YA primarily bookstores, and she's literally a teenager and she started a bookstore. So I just think that is the most impressive, cool thing, and she's lovely as well. So there's our little plugs, our shout outs to give you more endless TBR recommendations and places to visit. Once again, we will be following you for any sort of news and updates. We're always in your corner, Steven. We appreciate you so very much. We love you with our whole hearts, and we were so glad to hang out with you today.
Well, I love you right back. It truly is one of the unexpected joys of doing this for a living. Is it was short-sighted. I was so focused on publishing my first book. I never really thought of the friendships that I would make with booksellers, with librarians, and with readers. And I have met some of the most remarkable people. And I do, we've got the chance to hang out in person now, which is so great. But honestly, like I can say, like, if you love my books, if my humor and what I do jives with you, I can almost guarantee we'll be friends in IRL, as the kids say.
IRL. We are all besties here.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Thank you, Steven. We will talk to you later because this is a goodbye for now and not for forever. But thank you.
Goodbye for now. No, we need to make our way back to each other, and I have no doubt that will happen.
I know. I need a Palm Springs trip, so
yes, I'll open the caftan closet just for you, so you can choose. Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Take care. Have a great rest of your weekend. Talk soon.
All right. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.